say we're wrapping up James today.
We keep saying that.
I keep saying it, but I just keep getting stuck on certain verses, and so we're getting closer to finishing up chapter 5, but we're not finishing chapter 5 today. So,
Wow.
and for those of you who are watching, Jessie is going to be doing her own little mini-series after I'm done. So you guys will be in for a treat. She is, although she would say she isn't, she's really good at bringing the word. So whatever God puts on her heart to share, it's going to be good. So today we're picking up in James chapter 5, verse 12, and this kind of goes along with a movie that we watched last night, because it says, "Above all, my brethren, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth, or with any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment." And really what I feel like James is talking about there is just about integrity. You know, sometimes people have to say, like, they say all kinds of stuff, like, I swear on my mom that this is true. Or, you know, I swear to God. Like, first of all, we shouldn't be doing that. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you sometimes just saying that something is the way it is, or you trying to tell somebody a specific thing, isn't enough for them to believe you. And so a movie that we were watching last night was about a con artist, and it was based on a true story, and this guy was 17 when he was doing this, and I mean he was raking in millions of dollars doing what he was doing in the late 1960s. But there was several parts in the movie where you see him interacting with the FBI agent, and at separate times, both of them have to, like, kind of look each other in the eyes and be like, is this the truth? Like, are you really telling me the truth right now? Why? Because their character and the person who they're known, their reputation is, they're not really somebody who's truthful, especially the guy who was doing all committing all the fraud. So the FBI agent's like, first of all, I don't believe you, but then there's points in the movie where he's like, are you telling me the truth? Like, is this really the truth? And I feel like that happens a lot, not just in movies, but it happens in everyday life, where your reputation precedes you, and if you're not somebody who's of good reputation, then people have a tendency to not believe what you say. And I can attest in my own family that I had a sister who from a young age was accustomed to just exaggerating, making up stuff, and into our adult years, we would always say as a family, oh, but she said that, so I don't know how true it is. Mm-hmm. You know, and so it does have a tendency to follow you around, your reputation, and if you're not somebody who is a person of integrity, that's going to happen. You know, people are going to be like, I don't know how much I can really believe what you're saying, and I feel like this is what James is saying here. Be a person of good reputation. If you say you're going to do something, follow through on it. And we do that a lot with our kids. We try to teach them, if you make a commitment to something, you have to see it through. So if you make a commitment to do this, you can't flake out and be like, I don't want to do that anymore. You committed to doing it, now you have to stick with it. What are we trying to do? We're trying to instill in them that their yes should be yes and their no should be a no. And even Jesus was talking about this when he was delivering the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. So Jesus, he's talking about, all throughout the sermon, he's like dispelling a lot of things. He's talking to people, and he's like, listen, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. And then he continues to say things. You have heard that it was said to those of old. And he kind of repeats that over and over again throughout chapter 5. I mean, he says it repeatedly when he's talking about these little examples. And so you fast forward to verse 33, and again he's saying, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but you shall perform your oaths to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no. For whatever is more, that is from the evil one. So the reason why Jesus is saying that is because, and I'm trying to just quote it directly from there. In Numbers, Moses is delivering law to the people. And in Numbers 30, he's saying in verse 2, if a man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word, but he shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. If a man makes a vow to the Lord, he cannot break his word. That's a summary, essentially, what he's saying. And so here Jesus is talking essentially about all of these examples are like, don't do what the scribes and the Pharisees are doing. Because they take the word of God, they take those Old Testament commandments, and they twist them to benefit themselves. They twist them to profit themselves. They twist them for them to be in their favor. So what he's essentially saying is these people, they're not swearing by God, but now they're swearing by heaven, and they're swearing by earth, and they're swearing by Jerusalem. Why? So that they could technically not do what they were commanded there, which was, I didn't swear by God, so because I didn't swear by God, I don't have to honor the oath that I made. I swore by heaven or by earth. And so Jesus is like, don't do all of it. Why? Because all of those things that you think you're not swearing by, all those things belong to God. Heaven is his. Earth is his footstool. Jerusalem is his city. So really he's just saying, like, don't be like them. Don't do the things that they're doing. Because even in today's world, if you have a good attorney, Andrew says this, you can get out of a contract. Like, contracts don't really mean anything if you have a good attorney, because you can find loopholes in the contract to get yourself out of it. And so Jesus here is telling them, don't do what they're doing, but instead just be a person of good reputation. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And don't try to manipulate words and to twist words in a way to where you can just say that that's not what I meant, you know? Even in today's world, you can make an agreement with somebody, and if that person, if like you make a contract with someone, and then that contract gets passed on to somebody else, then you can come back and say, well, I didn't make a contract with the third party. I made a contract with the first party, so I'm not going to honor it anymore because it's no longer that person. Your word should be your word. If you said you're going to perform something, you're going to do something, you should stick with it no matter what. And there's a really good example that I want to go over in I was talking about the tribes of Israel right before they entered the Promised Land, and it just really highlights how these tribes were specifically honoring the thing that they said they would do. And I just feel like that's a good example to kind of drive home the point of, like, whatever we say we're going to do, we should do it. Like this week, I was trimming palms, right? And I would say, okay, I'm going to trim one palm. Well, when I'm out there and you kind of get into a groove, what do you want to do? I want to go to the next one. But then I like, as I was studying this, I was even reminding myself, even in those types of little situations, you have to honor your word. So if I said I'm going to do one, I have to stop at one. You know, and it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but if you start out with the little stuff and you don't really honor what you say in little things, you can't expect that in bigger things you're not going to do the same thing. So it really does start small. Like, you have to start practicing in small things to be watchful about what you say and to honor the things that you say you're going to do. So for me this week, it was just that, like, okay, what did I say I was going to do? Okay, I said I was going to do that, and then I'm going to follow through and I'm going to do it. And it's been helpful, honestly, because in the past I've had troubles with honoring the things that I would say, and so for me it's just helpful to further separate from being like that, just being somebody who's truthful, somebody who's going to say, if I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. If I said it's like this, that's honestly how it is. It's not different. So going back into Numbers 32, Moses is talking to the tribes, and they're about to cross over the Jordan. So I'm just trying to let you guys know kind of where we're at. And it says about these specific tribes, there was 2.5 tribes that settled to the east of the Jordan. They never crossed over into the promised land. And this is the reason why. It says, now the children of Reuben, the children of Gad, and it doesn't say here, but in Joshua it talks about the half tribe of Manasseh. So it was Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh had a very great multitude of livestock. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that indeed the region was a place for livestock, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spoke to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, and they're pretty much, I'm going to summarize, this is a place for livestock, and if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us over the Jordan. So in other words, they're just asking Moses, can we please stay here? We've got a lot of livestock. We're people of livestock. This land is perfect for us. We don't want to cross over into that side of the Jordan. We want to stay here. And so Moses kind of initially starts to reprimand them, essentially saying, are you trying to discourage the heart of the children of Israel by doing this? And then they finally came and said, they started in verse 16 of Numbers 32. Then they came near to him and said, we will build sheepfolds here for our livestock and the cities for our little ones, but we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the children of Israel until we have brought them to their place, and our little ones will dwell in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the children of Israel have received their inheritance. This is the promise. This is the word that they said to Moses. If you let us stay here, we'll build our cities, we'll make areas for our livestock, our wives and children will stay here, but every single one of us men, we're going to be armed, and we're going to go with you guys in battle to possess the promised land. And so, that was their word. That's the promise they made to Moses. And so, then he said, build cities for your little ones, and folds for your sheep, and do what has proceeded out of your mouth. That's essentially the end of the conversation that they had about it. Moses said, do what you got to do, but honor your word. Let your yes be yes. And so you fast forward into Joshua, and now we're in Joshua, so you kind of have to be mindful of the fact that now Joshua's in command. So they made a promise to Moses, and now Joshua is finally at the place where they're ready to go in and take the promised land. So you can already have a hiccup there. Why? Because they made a commitment to somebody who's no longer in charge. How many times do we hear that? Hey, I made that agreement with them. I mean, if you and I want to strike up a new agreement, we can do that. But that was the last people that I was dealing with. That happens a lot. But these people, these tribes were men of integrity. They were men who honored their word. And so when you pick up here in Joshua, they're about ready to go into the promised land, and it starts talking about them, and it says, and the Reubenites, the Gadites, and half tribe of Manasseh, Joshua spoke, saying, remember the word which Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord God is giving you rest and is giving you this land, your wives and your little ones. So he's essentially reminding them of the promise that they made. And it's saying essentially, you guys are not going to return to this until the Lord has given your brethren rest as he has given you rest. And so if you kind of look through Joshua, a lot of the initial chapters are talking about all the battles that they had to go through to finally possess the promised land. And in chapter 12, it says, it starts recounting all the kings that were conquered by Joshua. And the last thing it says in chapter 12 is all the kings, 31. So when they're recounting all the battles that they had to fight, they had to conquer 31 kings. And so when you think about that, honoring your word, 31 battles. Like, we're not talking about 1 or 2 battles. You would have had ample opportunity to be like, hey man, I helped you 10 times. We fought in 10 battles. We paid our debt. Like, this is it. I'm not going to keep going. I think we've done enough. And as people, we have a tendency to want to do that. Like, okay, I've done enough for this person. But if you said something, you need to follow through on your word. So these two tribes and a half, they stayed with the rest of their brothers until they fought 31 battles. And they conquered 31 kings. And finally, when they were done, in Joshua 22, finally at that point, they were given permission to go back home. It says, right at the beginning of Joshua 22, then Joshua called the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and he said to them, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord your God, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I commanded you. So they didn't just obey Moses, they didn't just honor their oath or their commitment to him, they honored their word even to Joshua. And he's like, you have not left your brethren these days, and you have kept the charge of the command of the Lord your God, and now the Lord your God has given rest to your brethren as he promised them. And now therefore return and go your tents to the land of your possession, which Moses the servant of the Lord gave you on the other side of the Jordan. 31 battles. These guys fought 31 battles alongside their brothers until they were able to take possession of the land that God had promised them. That's the kind of example that I think we as people, I mean as believers, but as people in general, that's how we should be. Like, are we willing to say, hey, I'm going to follow through on the thing that I said, regardless of how long it takes? It doesn't really say how many years it took them to fight those 31 battles, but you can't take away from the fact that they had to conquer 31 kings to finally get to that point. And they honored the thing that they said. Even Moses was like, that's fine, but just make sure you do everything that came out of your mouth. And I just love that part of it when he said that, like, do everything that proceeded forth from your mouth. We have to be that way. And this is what I think James is trying to say, and I think even Jesus was talking about. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Sometimes it's better to not say anything at all. You know, even the Bible talks about that. It's better to say you're not going to do it and do it than to say you're going to do something and then not do it. So even in that, sometimes if you don't want to tie yourself to something, don't say anything, and then just do it. That's still going to be better for you than if you say yes and then you end up not doing it. Why? Because it's a reputation, it's your character, it's your integrity, and people can see that. You know, our fruit is always going to be the thing that people look at. It's not necessarily the things that we say, it's more the things that we do. So if you say, yes, I'm going to do that, and you don't do it, your actions speak louder than the initial thing that you said. So to me, it was just such an important verse that I couldn't really move on into the rest of the end of chapter 5, because it speaks so much about reputation and integrity. And even that example of those tribes, like, to me, that's one of the greatest examples that I can think of. Like, man, these guys honored the thing that they said, and it didn't matter how long it took them. They stayed true to the thing that they said they were going to do. And so I just want to encourage us to be more like that as well in the things that we're doing in day-to-day life. If we said we're going to trim one palm, trim one palm. You know, if you say you're going to commit to helping somebody, help them. If you just get to a point where when people hear you talk, they know that that's what you're going to do because they know your reputation. They know what you're about. So that's it for
It's really good. I
for
need
today.
to apply it for my parenting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, honestly, even from that perspective, you could. And it teaches kids the importance of obedience, but immediacy too. Like, you know, if you say as a parent that you're going to do something and you don't do it, guess what? That kid will learn real fast that you're not somebody who means business. So.